Yeah, we're now live on YouTube.
Brill, thank you. So a proper good morning to everyone. Thank you for attending today's Sustainable Communities EAP meeting. We're going to start off, as we always do, with any apologies for absence.
Yeah, I've received apologies from councillors Dial and Dell, and we have councillors Pengeli and Tubbs here as substitutes.
Okay, great, thank you, and welcome to you two for this meeting. Next on the agenda is any declarations of interest from members. Are there any on the items that we've got? I can see shaking of heads, so that's all good. Great. And item number 3 is the minutes of the meeting held on the 9th of August. Hopefully you will have had a chance to read through those and check that you're happy that they're accurate in relation to what we discussed. Can't see anybody dissenting from that, so we'll take those as they are. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to the substantive agenda items, of which there are quite a few, so we've got a lot to discuss today. We're going to slightly rejig the order that's on the website. So we're going to have the last item on the North Northamptonshire Greenway strategy. We're going to do that first, just to allow officers to attend as and when they need to. So I'm going to hand over to Kerry for this, I believe.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Do you want me to share my screen, or can somebody share? I'm just looking at Raj. I'm happy to share my screen if that's...
If you can, I don't mind sharing if you need me to. I can do that now.
Let me just find the presentation. Is that capital? Yeah, oh, excellent. Okay, can everybody see that? Let me see if I can put it on. There we go, that's better. Everybody see the presentation?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry. Okay, so I'm just going to, the slides just give a brief summary of what has been very comprehensive piece of work over the last 6 months or so to develop the North Northampton Greenway strategy. The strategy was brought forward to in an executive report last month for approval to go out to public consultation. So it's currently out to public consultation. So there's the strategy document, which is the master plan for the Greenway. It's quite a technical document and there's quite a lot of appendices to it. And then there's also out for consultation the first sort of major feasibility study of the next phase of the Greenway, which is for the Rushton to Wellingborough route, and that's out for consultation as well. The public consultation runs until I think the 9th of November. Certainly make sure the links to the documents and the consultation circulated, Chair, if people haven't seen them. You know, once we've received the feedback, we'll make any amendments that we need to make, and then it will be brought forward formally for final adoption. So just as a bit of what we're going to cover, I'm going to cover in the slides, a little bit of a project recap, and then focusing on the work that's just to where we are now, and in particular the prioritisation process in terms of the routes that have been prioritised initially. That doesn't mean to say that all the routes have been identified aren't important. It's just giving us a starter for 10, really. Just to say that there are high-level costs associated with the development of the strategy, which are quite significant at about £38 million. That money obviously is not in the capital programme for the council, but by having a strategic framework, a master plan and a series of design recommendation books for different routes will enable us or put us in a much stronger position to bid for other external funding pots that may become available, such as through Active Travel England and other pots, to enable us to start to deliver this. This is a long-term strategy over the next sort of 15 years. It's not something we would be able to deliver overnight, and we probably wouldn't deliver overnight. But just to sort of cover off that it is about giving us the ability to be able to bid for that funding as it becomes available. So the strategy produces an overarching vision and objectives for the North Northants Greenway. It builds on a lot of work that was undertaken formerly by East Northants Council, where the Greenway started, and a number of phases have been delivered out there. And when the new council was vested in 2021, a new project board for the Greenway was pulled together with all the key internal and external stakeholders. And it was felt at that point it'd be really important to see how we could expand the Greenway across North Northants and to develop a master plan to do that. Funding was secured through shared prosperity funding to help us develop strategy, and some consultants were appointed early in 2023 to get work underway. And as I've mentioned, as well as developing, or as part of the strategic document, the consultants have worked with us to develop some design recommendation booklets. And although we wouldn't have a book at this point for every single route, they have developed them, or are in the process of developing them for the prioritised routes, which gives us then a baseline to use that process moving forward for any other routes that wish to prioritise. The programme has been quite detailed and quite technical. There was a lot of desktop analysis of all the different policies, both at local and national levels, that guide us towards the development of a greenway, and not just in terms of all the sort of relevant planning documents, but obviously it has a big impact on climate change and environmental solutions, but also on the health and well-being of our wider population. So that baseline policy review was undertaken, and there was a huge amount of data collection done as well, in terms of the way that people get about currently in relation to act travel. And all of that was then fed into the development of the master plan. There were a series of workshops held with key stakeholders in order to test out a lot of the data and add additional intelligence to that in order to bring us to the position that we are now. And one of the other pieces of work that came out of that, on top of the prioritisation, was the development of a developer contribution strategy or framework or formula in order to enable us, as part of the potential funding sources moving forward, to work closely with developers across North Northants when there are new developments coming forward, to see how development contributions can help us deliver out the Greenway. And I think that's been a really significant and important piece of work as well. So as well as having the strategy as part of those design booklets for the various routes, they're not, I wouldn't say that they're going to be full feasibility studies for those prioritised routes, which is why we're calling them design recommendation booklets. But they will go into a certain level of detail for each of those prioritised areas. So there's a slide that just covers some of the policy context. I think colleagues would be fairly comfortable with the fact that this is something that is not just the right thing to do morally and ethically, but there's a lot of national and local plans that support the development of active travel, so walking, cycling, wheeling, across North Northants. It's been developed using the LC-WIP approach, so robust development process. And so what we end up with is a series of LC-WIPs across the area that focus primarily on the urban areas, and then the Greenway strategy sort of acts as the rural LC-WIPs, talking about how you can connect active travel routes in between the urban and the rural areas, or connecting the rural areas to the urban areas. So it will give us a really, really good network across North Northants, which I think is something that's really, really positive. So the next couple of slides, I won't go into all the technicality, but if you have read some of the strategic documents, you'll see the level of detail. But there was a huge amount of demand analysis and evidence and intelligence gathered from a whole range of data sources to have a look at, what all that data tells us about how people get about in Northamptonshire. So that particular slide talks about the demand of walking, the demand for walking and cycling, using a whole range of data sets. And the next slide provides a straight line network between the different settlements across North Hants. And the red lines were presented at the stakeholder workshop to try and then look at which of those may or may not be prioritised moving forward. So as I mentioned earlier, there was a series of stakeholder workshops over the spring and the summer this year that the consultants led, and there was a lot of in-depth analysis of the data and the intelligence, and then a focus on the particular routes, and other routes that hadn't been prioritised by the consultants were added in by the different stakeholders. And I think that was really, really invaluable. So just to summarise, the vision for the North Northampton Way is that it will be a county-wide rural network of safe, largely traffic-free routes suitable for walking, wheeling and cycling, connecting settlements, employment, leisure and tourism destinations. So it isn't just about tourism, it's very much about using active travel for people to get to where they need to get to in their daily lives. And I know when I presented this last week at the Active Communities EAP, there was a lot of discussion about the real importance of enabling our residents to get to work without using their cars, basically, wherever possible. And then there's a series of objectives that are on that slide for the Greenway strategy. And as I've said, that is about enabling people to use car-free routes to get to lots of different places across the area. The strategy goes into quite a lot of detail about and a visual detail about the different infrastructure that would need to be delivered out as part of the Greenway. So it's not just the actual routes themselves. We need to look at connectivity. So if the routes pass across main roads, then we've got to make sure that there's safe passage in whatever way, whether that's bridges or whether that's something else. We talked a lot last week about lighting at the EAP and safety, because we can put routes in, but unless they're properly lit and people feel safe using them, then they won't use them. So hopefully the strategy covers all the different infrastructure elements that need to be considered, and also accessibility for people with mobility issues. And so you'll see some of those as I've discussed. And also bicycle parking is really important, because we want people to get on their bikes. We need to make sure they've got safe places to leave them as well. So as I mentioned earlier, the high level costings are covered in the strategy, and I wanted to mention it because it is quite a significant sum of money, but it does give us the ballpark figures, but it also gives us the ability then to think about, well, where would we need to prioritise, and what sort of funding pots might we need to be considering moving forward. So the prioritisation I've mentioned, just to give a bit more detail on that, it's sort of not set in stone. It doesn't mean to say just because we've identified 4 routes at this point that others aren't important, and that there wouldn't necessarily be funding pots that came available which were more it was more logical to apply for a different route, and that's absolutely fine. But again, it was just about really starting somewhere, and the prioritisation toolkit that was developed covered those things there. So trying to decide which routes would be priorities based on those things. So road safety, access to education training, access to employment, particularly taking into account areas of growth, access to leisure and tourism, access to green space, and obviously cost has to come into it as well. And so those were all factored in to come up with the first 4 identified priority routes, which are listed there. And they're not insignificant distances, so there's quite a lot of complexity within those routes themselves. And the consultation, as I said at the very beginning, is out now, and I think it closes on the 9th of November. It's going out to all. We're targeting stakeholders, but it's also publicly accessible on the Council's consultation hub. So please help by sharing that as widely as possible, because the more feedback we get, the better. And we're asking questions in that consultation about modes of transport, frequency of use, whether people agree with the vision and the outcomes and objectives in the strategy, and in particular whether anything else when anything significant is missing that people think should be covered in a strategy like that. And the other thing we're trying to do is to to develop a network of Greenway champions. So as well as having the board, we have 4 ward members, one for each of the localities that champion the Greenway. But this hopefully will be important to lots of people out in our communities. So we want to develop a network of Greenway champions who can spread the word and who we can use as we start to develop the feasibility studies for different phases to really get the word out and get local knowledge, intelligence and feedback throughout as we're developing the work moving forward. And that's a bit it from me, Chair, so I'm happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you, Kerry, for going through that and providing the update on where we're at. I know that a lot of work has been going into this to gather the data for everything as you've presented there. And I think we all appreciate how important the Greenway is locally. There's so many users of it. I used it this morning and many other people were out there doing the same thing. So to see it expand will be really valuable in so many ways for the whole of the community. Councillor Allibone, you've got a question.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, excellent presentation and a very comprehensive where we've got to where we're at so far. 2 brief points. One, you mentioned Strava data. Perhaps you covered that in the early part of your presentation, but I didn't catch it. I just wonder what Strava data was. And obviously you said it's not in our capital budget, 38.1 million pounds. I'm just wondering how it's going to be funded. I appreciate it's long term, but it can't all be covered under Section 106s and things like that. So I'm just wondering what the sort of long term aspirations are for funding.
Yeah, happy to come back on that. I'm not actually an expert on Strava data, but I can get information on that for you. Just as I think Strava, my understanding is it will be a data set that pulls together a range of data that's available, and it just is pulled together, and Strava is probably the software that's used to do that. But I will clarify that because I'm not the technical expert. In terms of the funding, absolutely, it's not in the capital programme. It's a lot of money. And obviously, those are high level costs, and we would have to, really get detailed cost plans for the different phases as we start to put them out. But having the strategy and having some of the early feasibility studies will enable us to bid into significant pots of funding. There are a range of them. So we know that Active Travel England are looking at funding active travel routes across the UK, so that is a pot of money that we would be considering. We've previously looked at whether levelling up funding was appropriate. I'm not saying that the council would want to say the Greenway is a priority for levelling up. I don't know, but that's another potential pot of funding, and anything else that comes up moving forwards. Yes, 106 is an important contributory factor, but it would be contributions to a broader project. And we've had 106 funding for the Greenway in East Northants previously, and when we've just, for example, had confirmation of an additional pot of 106 that will help us put the disabled accessibility ramp in at Washbrook Road in Rushden. 106 contributes, but obviously wouldn't be the overall part. My project officer, Lucy, Chair, has they've got her hand up. She can probably answer some of the technical things a bit better than I can.
Thank you very much.
Lucy, if you'd like to come in.
Morning, everybody. Yeah, I just put my hand up to help Kerry out. I think Kerry's covered it all there with regards to funding. The developer contributions formula that's devised through this strategy is going to be really helpful. It does, however, identify that it could only fund about 12% or something of the whole of those costed routes. But what we've found in the past is, and this is one of the reasons for having the Greenway champions, having locally interested people. So, for example, in Easton-on-the-Hill, there's a group of gentlemen that are trying to create a connection between Easton-on-the-Hill, Collie Weston and Duddington through to Kingscliff and through to Stamford. They're doing really well on their, obviously with some support, they're doing very well. They've got the funding through Orgy and the landfill site at Kingscliff to pay for their feasibility study. And by getting these Greenway champions and groups like this interested, they have a further ability to apply for pots of money that we can't necessarily apply for. So another example would be some residents of Apethorpe. They're on one of the identified routes. They're very interested in helping deliver this. They could also benefit from the Augean funds. So by developing Greenway champions, it gives us a wider spread, if you like, of trying to get funding available.
Great, thank you, Lucy, for filling us in on that. That's useful. And just to come back on the Strava question, so it's an app that people use to track their running and cycling, and so you're able to see the routes that they've taken from that as well, and see which routes are most popular, I would imagine, in this context as well. Councillor O'Hara.
It was just really to come back and ask Lucy something, please, Chair. It's looking at the funding and what have you. I know for some of the projects that we have done outdoors, we've accessed monies from various operators of landfill sites, and also in this area, Mick George was a great supporter of projects that we've embarked on. Would that be something that they would engage in? I know is FCC that we use at the moment. I know they're helping deliver a skate ramp for us in Burton, but I'm sure they'd be interested in trying to get the connections for us so we can walk and we can cycle and enjoy the outdoors as we did, and everybody kept mentally sane during COVID. And I didn't know whether that's something that we could look at, or whether we've got a partnership with, as we have, as I say, for getting things in place for our young people to enjoy.
I'm sure we certainly could. As this consultation's out, I'm hoping that I'm going to get some responses of people in the local area that want to, look at it more closely to help me design these recommendation booklets. So if you know of some people, or you would like to help get involved with putting that package together around Burton Latimer, because Burton Latimer has been identified in the North Hants Greenway strategy. Burton to Earthenborough is one of them in the priority routes, but it's also in the Eyes Valley Greenway. So we've got a very good case then to put an application, but it would, I'm not entirely sure on the Mick George criteria, but I know they generally like to fund large capital projects. So I can't see why, with the help of Burton Latimer, and if it's through the town council, I don't know, but we could do that, and that would be another, like I said, another source of funding. So absolutely, in short, we could do that.
Sorry, Lucy, Chair, through you. I mean, I know that in Burton we've got a very active walking group, and they come from, quite a few of the surrounding villages, including Bindon, etc., and Isham. And I know that there's various projects. Obviously, we have the community payback scheme helping us clear walking areas, but there's also the Friends of the Eyes as well. And the Friends of the River Nen, because obviously I paddleboard a lot, and they're very active in making sure that our open areas are kept clean and safe. So I think that there is other avenues. So if I can help, I'd love to be involved.
Absolutely, thank you. If we could have an exchange emails after this, that would be great. Thank you, Councillor O'Hara.
Okay,
Thanks
thank you.
Support.
Great, thank you. Can't see any other hands up. I suppose the last comment to make is, as Kerry said, please do participate in the consultation, push it out to your town and parish councils, and encourage them and local residents to fill it in, because it would be really useful to Lucy, to Kerry and the team. So thank you both for your input there as well. Do appreciate it coming along and talking to us today. It's really useful. I can see Councillor O'Hara's hand has just gone back up. Just want to check that.
Sorry, Chair, one quick question. How do we prioritise? I kind of looked at the criteria, but because I'm thinking of some of the villages that aren't very well connected in terms of walkways out of the village, like Pytchley hasn't really got a safe walkway out of there. It's kind of very much cut off. So I didn't know how we prioritise, what are going to be the priority routes. for want of a better word.
Lucy, do you want to answer that?
Shall I answer that one, Kerry? I don't mind. Okay, so as Kerry said, all those routes that are there on the list, there's 33 plus another 2, which is Rushden to Wellingborough and the Eyes Valley, Corby, Kettering, Wellingborough. There's no reason why we cannot add more routes where there's a shown need and demand, and we've got the support of internally and externally. So the more we raise the profile of this, the more success we'll have. Because the other point I wanted to make was Active Travel England came to visit us a few weeks ago, and the way they operate is they rank each local authority. So we all start at 1, and the more we live and breathe active travel, the more we do towards it, the higher they score us and the more likely they are to give us more funding. So by filling in that survey and passing it to many as people as possible to show that there's a real appetite here, that will all stand us in good stead for future funding.
Okay, perfect. So we need to get the town councils really to send a report back.
Yes, please. Yes, please. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Lucy, you had your hand up again. Just want to let you come in there.
That was just to say that point about Active Travel England, really, just to, really drive it home that as many people, and pass it amongst your networks if you could, please. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. Great, thank you for that. So we'll leave that item there. Again, thank you for the discussion on it, and we'll move on to the next one, which is an update on the pollinator strategy. So just looking to see who I'm handing over to, possibly Liam, I think. Great, so over to you, Liam.
That's what we're prepared for. Hello, everybody. Thank you for inviting me back to give an update on the pollinator strategy and where we are now. I'm just going to share my screen. Hopefully everyone can see that. So the pollinator strategy has been rolled out, and we're trying to implement the 4 main objectives, which are to increase foraging resources for pollinators, improve habitat and nesting and overwintering opportunities, reduce herbicide use, and participate in pollinator projects across North Northants. So we've made quite a lot of progress so far. One of our main campaigns remains the Pardon the Weeds campaign. This is advertised throughout the main growing season. Signs are put into grass verges, patches where wildflower seeds have been sown, and other areas of parks and open spaces to get the message across of why areas may not be as kept as bold and greens, etc. We've now rolled this out to Wellingborough. The in-house team there have been utilising the signage there and working with other partners, town councils, the consortia towns in former East Northants and villages. Also working quite closely with our partners in highways, who are looking to roll this out further across the highways network. It's mainly been utilised in urban areas, but I know the highways department are looking to roll it out across the main road network, where it's safety critical, but it's another thing that's being rolled out there. Butterfly banks have been installed at a number of sites. We've got 3 pilot sites this year. We've been working very closely with the Butterfly Conservation Charity, who are a UK-based charity, and we've been one of their test sites in the UK for this. We've installed 3 pollinator banks so far. So these are banks made up of rough earth. There's nothing special to them. The worse the soil, the better. It helps the flowers grow. They've been planted up with perennial flower seeds, so should come back year after year. We've put them in urban sites, so these are on the edge of large open spaces. They've been well received, and they do look quite stunning when they're in full bloom. This is just a little snapshot of one there on the screen, but it doesn't really do it justice. When it's in full bloom, it's quite good to look at. So these provide sites for breeding, the increased habitat and overwintering sites. Butterflies don't tend to travel too far from their sources of food. They tend to breed and feed at the same spot. So these have certainly given them a good chance to increase in numbers. We plan to install further 3 sites next year. They'll be in the Wellingborough area, in parks and open spaces there. And it's something we want to continue rolling out across the whole of Northants. I want to just talk quickly about the Eyes Valley Parkland project. So the large open space on the Eyes Valley. Previously, we maintained it as purely cut grass. It was all cut to an amenity level of 30 millimeters all year round, pretty much. It's a large space that can be used for a number of things. It's very, very popular with dog walkers, children playing football, and there's a very, very active group based at the Green Patch, which is a green flag site just next to the Eyes Valley Park. We have adjusted the cutting regime there, increased grass swards, and there's a lot of longer grass areas now with wide pathways cut in there, so people can still enjoy it, but there's more of a guided walk through. We've also responded to desire lines through the long grass, which is often the shortest route that people like to take, so we've implemented those cutting in as well. We planted 120 trees on the site last year, variety of species there, and we continue to care for those, and they're doing really well. The survival rate at the moment is 97%, so it's quite a good survival rate of trees there. We've got a watering program in place, and also an aftercare regime which is in place with the LATF funding for this site. So it's been quite helpful to have that. The grass cuttings, once they are collected, which is pretty much due now, it's more of a hay cut. We do it twice a year, and the grass cuttings are stored on site in a neighbouring field. It provides overwintering opportunities for insects and some of the water, the species that live, next to the river. So it's quite a nice little site we do there. And we also transplant meadow cuttings from other sites. There's an established meadow in Morsley. We cut and collect the seeds from there, and we transplant that to a neighbouring field. And over the last 5 to 6 years, that's now becoming an established meadow with quite a few different species there. So that's something we roll out there at the moment as well. I've mentioned before tree planting. The tree planting season is fast approaching. It's been unseasonable this year. We've had quite a lot of rain and sun. It's been perfect growing medium for a lot of plants, but we'll soon be commencing our tree planting programme. We've got another 1,100 standard trees planned for urban areas in Wellingborough, Corby and Kettering, and other market towns in Northants. We've been provisionally awarded 261,000 further funding from the LATF for this round of funding. That's going to help us with the aftercare of the planted trees. We're planning on 3,000 whips and feathers to be planted with community groups and schools and businesses within the NNC area, as we try to look to create woodlands outside of existing woodlands. This has been made possible with the Woodland Accelerator Officer, who's a funded post for 2 years. They've been working really hard with other officers, particularly Rebecca's team in the woodlands, community groups, schools, and hopefully it's going to help us achieve our ambitious planting goals. The use of herbicides, we have taken steps to reduce our usage of chemicals. We've seen a large reduction in the amount we use. We've reduced the actual areas we spray. We've worked with the cleansing team and the highways team to implement a more rigorous road sweeping programme. This has reduced the need for us to spray in gullies, working in the roads. So the amount of weeds that we spray has conversely reduced. We've also moved to new technologies. We're exploring new technologies for the last few years. We've gone from an atomized delivery system to a droplet delivery system. This has immediately reduced our usage by 44% as a minimum. So it's more of a targeted spray rather than an atomized spray. So you need less of the chemical to get to the root of the weed. And yeah, so that's the delivery of the main objectives. So any questions? I'll fire away.
Great, thank you, Liam, for going through that. There's some really good stuff going on with the pollinator strategy and the different bits that you're doing to try and increase the number of pollinators locally, and really successful, as we can see in those areas and from the pictures. Just quickly before I hand over to others, you picked up there the last bit around weeds and the use of herbicides, and just wondered if it might be helpful just to give some context as to why we need to do that in some areas, whereas in other areas we're obviously letting things grow as they are. But perhaps if you're just able to explain why that is important still in some areas.
Sure. So on the highways, so for instance on the footpaths, we spray to the back line where it abuts property. In terrace streets, obviously, that they might not have a front, like don't have a front garden, so it butts straight onto the highway footpath. So we spray to the back line to keep the weeds down, which is sort of growing between that. There's often quite a little gap between the bricks and the pathway. So spraying out those areas. Obviously, we can't really work in the road. So spraying in gullies where it invariably washes down the drain, we don't do that. That's why we don't spray in the gullies of the roads. That's tackled through road sweeping. We don't spray within the parks and open spaces around trees. That's not a method that we employ anymore. So we've reduced it within our parks and open spaces that way.
Great, thank you, Liam. Councillor O'Hara.
Thank you, Chair. Liam, fab presentation. I love what we're doing. My only concern is that there seems to be priority areas that we're caring for, and the fact that we've planted so many trees and they're not just whips, and they're more established, and we're looking after them in terms of watering and we've got the aftercare is amazing. My only question is, in some of the villages, the grass is left so long that and it isn't collected; it's just cut. And it just blows all over the village, so it looks like an old western town. And I just wondered what we will do with that next year, because I think for this year we did leave it very long because of the growing season, because of the weather this year. It's been very warm, the ground's very warm, so the grass has grown so much quicker. So therefore, our ideals are amazing, to help with the pollinators. But actually, when the grass is that long, it doesn't do them any good at all. My second question is, the butterfly blanks are amazing. I just wondered, is there a list of where we're going to do them in the future, and can we proffer areas, or can we suggest to councils where they might want to do it themselves, town councils might want to do it from the community groups that are in there? Could we get involved in that way? And the other thing I wondered about was where we've got developments going in and there's open spaces, can we influence the developers to plant more sustainable and more pleasing plants instead of these awful thorny bushes that they put in that some of them do flower, they get, but actually they're not very pleasing throughout the year, and don't provide a good habitat for our wildlife. And as we're all aware, there's a lot of wildlife around us nowadays because they're losing their habitats, so they're coming into these open spaces on these new estates. We've got some of our open spaces protected because they're visually important, and under SSP2 some of them are protected, but I think if we can enhance more areas, then it would augur well for us as a council, because we're not just caring for the valleys. Where I think the other concern I have, sports head on, is where we've got big open spaces and we are caring for them, and we've got the cut at the 30 mil, and then we've left some as a higher area and it's rough. The open spaces are important for children to be able to play, but the football pitches, when we play football, we have to go and check them because people do walk their dogs and don't always clean up after them. So it's all those factors that are placed, on our grounds people, and I think they do an amazing job. But the final question is, what happens to the areas that aren't open to the public as much, or open to the public eye as much? I've got a road in Barton Seagrave and it backs on, so we come off junction 10, there's a walkway there through a private estate, and then it comes to the part of Old Barton, and right along there, which runs along the junction 10 of the A14, there's absolutely, it's overgrown with Russian weed. And I just wondered what we're doing about that kind of thing, because you can barely walk along the path now. It's so bad. So I didn't know whether that's something that we could do or we were involved in, because I've reported it a couple of times and nothing's happened. So I don't know whether that's, we decided we're leaving it in terms of herbicides, etc. But something needs to happen because it's actually affecting all those houses along that stretch. Thank you.
There's a few questions there, so I think I got them all down. So the verges within the villages and parishes, we cut them on behalf of the Highways Department. So we work closely with our colleagues in Highways with a number of prescribed cuts. So I'll pick that up with them and hopefully give you a fuller answer later with the number of prescribed cuts that they have moving forward. We don't generally cut and collect on the verges. The disposals involved in that are quite astronomical. So that's one reason why we don't do it. I understand that, you know, when they do get left long, it does blow around. We try to mitigate that with blowers where possible. If it is blown onto driveways, etc., we try to avoid that, obviously, during the course of our cutting. The butterfly blanks, they are great. We are looking to roll them out, but this year was very much a test year to see how they went. We are looking to work with private landowners on it, community groups, towns and parish councils, and to really try and increase the number. So my officer team, headed up by Dave Lane, who I know you've worked with on the skate ramp at Latimer, we're looking to do that at the moment with other people that want to take part in it. So I'll definitely roll it out into other areas. I don't comment on the planning of new estates. I'm hoping Jonathan might jump in on that one, maybe, if he can.
That's a wish list, Liam.
There's a differentiation between what my team do is with the in-house service of the grounds department and the highways team again. So I know the walkway you're referring to that runs along the A14. I've been speaking with my colleagues in Kia about that one. So hopefully I'll get Ben to get back to you when he can about getting that one cleared up.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Bone.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Liam. Great presentation. Just a couple of points. I think Councillor O'Hara's raised it already. The butterfly banks, the 3 pilot sites, I wouldn't mind knowing exactly where they are, and then the 3 that you've got in mind for 2024. And then the third point, the Woodland Accelerator Officer. Do we have a name for he or she? That would be helpful just to know. Thanks, yep. Liam. Thank you.
So the pilot sites, there's 2 in Corby, one at Bonington Walk in Corby, which is a large open space, and another at Colliers Avenue, which borders the Kingswood Wood. Is that? Yeah. And then a further site at the KLV on Thurston Drive. So there's 2 in Corby and 1 in Kettering. So they're the 3 sites. We're looking to do 3 more in Wellingborough next year as a minimum. We haven't decided where yet. We're still working with officers from other areas in relation to net biodiversity gain, and we're putting plans together for improvements on open spaces. So it will form part of that stream of work. And then Hannah Dunstan is the Woodlands Creator Officer. So that's Hannah Dunstan, not Dunstan.
Right, Dunstan.
Dunstan, yeah.
Brilliant.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I was interested in your experiments that you've been doing with droplet technology rather than mist sprays. Obviously, we're all trying to save excessive use of chemicals. I do on the farm, but if we're using glyphosate, for example, it needs to be rain fast on the leaf for a couple of hours, or an hour if you use a water softener. Because if you mist it onto a leaf, it sticks and then it gets translocated down to the root. Whereas if we use two Causa spray nozzles and you've got droplets, they tend to roll off the leaf, in which case they're not as effective at all. And I'm just sort of wondering I would have thought you would have been using more chemical with droplets than you would with an atomized spray.
No, I'll be happy to share with you the data sheet if you'd like me to. I can send you through the data sheet for that, and it explains obviously how the technology works. It's a pre-mixed solution, so it's not dilutable with water. It's not a pressurized system. It's battery operated. So you're probably seen, you're obviously aware of how it used to be done with a pressurized system on a backpack. That would atomize it, mix it with water. This is more of an oil-based system. It's not oil, but it's a composition of different delivery techniques. I'll send you the data sheet, and that will have everything on there of how it's applied.
Thank you, Liam. That would be useful, because I think all agricultural sprayers, we have 4 nozzles on each outlet, which you just rotate round depending on what use and what we're trying to achieve. And it's actually, nozzle technology is quite sophisticated these days. So I would appreciate seeing some of the data. Thank you.
This has 8 different settings on the nozzle for different paces and different types of weeds. So it's quite a read.
Thank you. Councillor Pengelly.
Yes, thanks, Liam, and you do a real good job under difficult circumstances. I understand that. It's to do with herbicides, and you mentioned the fact that you're using less. It'd be good for us to be able to say how much you're now using compared to how you used to use before, and also how we're going to and what equipment we need to use no herbicides going forward, because that is the goal that we should have. But no, that's difficult when you get people like me saying, what are you doing about the weeds on this street and this street and this street? But there are alternatives, and what we're doing about that.
So we've explored a number of alternatives. We've tried the hot foam. That had other adverse side effects. So we didn't go with the hot foam. It's also, glyphosate use does remain the most cost-effective way to treat weeds at present. We baseline data for last year, because obviously the Wellingborough side of the operation was outsourced. So we used last year as a baseline. We report through on a quarterly basis the chemical usage. We feed that back through. This year we've used, I did have it on one of my slides, it's something like 100 litres thus far. We're approaching the end of the spraying season, so we've reduced it considerably. Our target usage is 266 litres per year. So I don't want to predict, but well, I can, because it's figures. We're going to be below that. So that's our current KPI on glyphosate use. But we have been exploring different technologies. We've tried a plant-based acid. The application rate was 5 times greater than that of the chemicals we're using at the minute. And obviously that comes with a cost implication as well. But we're always open to new technology that comes on the market, and we're always looking. So if anything does become available, we'll obviously try it.
Thank you, Liam. And just to add to that a bit, because I know we've discussed this, I believe it's at full council a few months ago as well, clearly recognise the importance of reducing this as much as we can, and have set that if we can get rid of it, we'll absolutely get rid of it. There's still the legal need to make sure that we're maintaining certain areas so that there's not structural issues, etc., which sometimes I think limits a little bit what Liam and the team can do in terms of changing what they're doing at present. But as Liam said, they're constantly looking at ways to either reduce it or use things that are better than at present. So absolutely the goal is to get rid of it when we can. Just got to work through that to get there, to make sure that we're meeting the legal requirements as well that we've got on all of it. Councillor Tubbs.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Liam, for the update on the pollinator strategy. I wanted to ask, is there a way that some residents could get their street or the area outside their house taken off a mowing or a spraying list, or not? Because we had an issue with some residents in my ward. They'd planted wildflowers and they got mowed. So is there a way around that? Thank you.
I think I know the ward you're referring to. I think it's about communication. I think it was more of a guerrilla planting exercise, and they just started growing, but no one told the guys that were there, so we would have avoided them and tried to work with the residents on that occasion. There has been a couple of streets that we are trialled a no spray, and there's a little committee on those streets who hand weed directly outside their properties. That's in discussions with the highways team, so it is something we are exploring, but it relies on a number of different factors that are outside of our control sometimes.
Okay, thank you, Liam, for that. I can't see any other hands up at the moment, so thank you everybody for your contributions there. Really useful, and Liam, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. So moving on to the next item, we are going to have an update on woodland management. So I am going to hand over to Rebecca, I believe, for this.
Thank you very much. I'll just share my screen, bear with me. Can everybody see that?
Not yet, but it might just take a few seconds to come through.
Let me try. Not used to Zoom. Used to Teams now. No, it's not letting me do that one. Sorry about this.
Rebecca, it's fine. I can. Oh, never mind.
Oh, has it come up?
Yeah, it's up.
Ah, lovely. Okay, so I've got several screens now on my. I'll just leave it there. Thank you. So no, actually, bear with me because otherwise I can't see whether I'm. Which screen have you got up at the moment? Sorry, because mine's not showing it on my screen for some reason.
So we haven't got the full presentation mode on.
No. Is that
Rebecca, it's okay. I can stop your sharing and I can.
That would be useful. Sorry about that. Like I say, it's for some reason it's not coming up properly on my screen. Thank you very much. Okay, so sorry about that technical hitch. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. For those of you that don't know me, and I think most do, I've been managing the woodlands in Corby for the past 12 years. And now on an interim basis, I'm also looking after the country parks across the north, and working very closely with Liam in the grounds department. I'm here today, though, to give you all an overview of the Woodland Project, looking at its outcomes and achievements, and we'll leave you hopefully considering how we can secure its future financially. So for those of you that might not be aware, we started the Woodland Project with Thuracell and Hazelwoods, which is a 75-hectare ancient woodland comprising of woodland, scrub and grassland located in the centre of Corby. The management and enhancement of Hazel and Thuracell Woods was referenced as a key issue by Corby Borough Council and residents back in 2007. The site was recognised as an exceptional resource and as such was identified as an opportunity to secure and enhance the ecological, aesthetic and social value of the woodland through active woodland management, and it soon earned the title of the Green Heart of Corby. So in 2012, using Homes and Communities funding from the Corby swimming pool development, the Woodland Project was founded. A woodland manager, myself, and one Parks and Woodland Ranger were appointed, with their focus primarily being on Hazel and Thuracell Woods at the time. Further funding was then identified through the Forestry Commission's Countryside Stewardship Grant, which partially supports the operational budget for the management plan. Social engagement is as much as part of the managing the woodlands as the operational delivery. There are 6 Friends of groups in Corby, with the Friends of Hazel and Thuracell being the largest group, and they continue to offer daily activities throughout the week for our volunteers. The volunteers also assist each winter on an extensive copsing programme, which in turn helps us to deliver our targets for the Forestry Commission grant. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So the Woodland Project received additional Section 106 funding in 2019, which allowed us to implement active management of not just Hazel and Thurasell Woods, but also 4 other sites in Corby, including Kingswood Local Nature Reserve, East Carlton Countryside Park, Weldon Woodland Park, and West Glebe. And the slide provides some further detail on each of those sites. The strategic work is overseen again by myself, whilst the practical management is undertaken now by 3 parks and woodland rangers and over 80 regular volunteers. The project also hosts a Heritage Volunteer Officer, which is funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund, who focuses on providing an all-inclusive, thriving volunteer programme. For example, the project officer placement for young people at risk of being engaged in criminal activities, and the placement encourages them to positively redirect their energy and hopefully steer them away from a destructive path. Next slide, please. So from being a no-go area in 2007, Hazel and Thurasell Woods has now been transformed into a safe and welcoming woodland and has received green flag status since 2014. In 2022, it also celebrated as being chosen as part of the nationwide network of 70 ancient woodlands, which were dedicated to the Queen in celebration of the Platinum Jubilee. As you'd imagine, this is huge testament to the hard work of both the staff and the volunteers. And we've also since gained green flag status in East Carlton Countryside Park in 2021, alongside Coronation Park, which is managed by the Grounds Maintenance Department. So this slide just shows some of the outcomes that we've achieved over the years, and I've cherry-picked just a few. So in terms of environmental outcomes, we've identified 25 veteran trees, which are currently being protected from competing tree growth. 12 hectares of coppicing and 14 hectares of thinning is completed annually by staff and volunteers each winter. Active management not only makes the woodlands safer, but we also know that it makes it more diverse and encourages a wider variety of wildlife into the area. We've planted over 7,000 whips across the last few years, which have been planted across all of the sites in question, in collaboration with Carbon Footprint and local businesses. And the team, as Liam mentioned earlier, are also working with the grounds team and the Woodland Acceleration Officer to help meet the ambitious tree planting targets over the next 2 years for NNC. We also provide regular training opportunities for our volunteers to upskill and develop if they wish to do so. So over 50 volunteers have been trained in first aid. We've had 10 volunteers successfully qualified in chainsaw use, and 25 volunteers have been successfully trained in using brush cutters and strimmers. And as part of that high quality volunteer programme, we regularly see over 80 volunteers working with us on a weekly basis. As you'd imagine, health and wellbeing is a huge positive outcome from being involved in the project, as well as supporting emotional and social wellbeing in some of our more vulnerable volunteers. So the project has also been proven to improve self-esteem and confidence building through regular training and also team building opportunities. Next slide, please. Relies on external funding. Financial sustainability has always been important and at the forefront of my mind. In 2014, we opened Foxy's Woodland Shop in East Carlton Countryside Park, which sells a variety of items, including firewood, which is felled locally through the project and seasoned in our own drying bays. The firewood is certified by the Ready to Burn scheme, reassuring those who purchase that we are an approved supplier. And then all profit is ploughed back into the Woodland Project to support future sustainability of those green spaces. More recently, a growing project has been established in the now disused bowling green in Coronation Park, and a future ambition is to create a tree nursery to allow the project to grow locally native trees to be transplanted back into our parks and woodlands. The growing project is fast establishing itself within the community with links to groundwork, active parks and the Wildlife Trust, with the aim being to provide a broad offering of opportunities to improve health and well-being. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned at the beginning, social forestry was identified as the most appropriate way to enhance, manage and protect our woodlands, ecology and biodiversity through not only highly skilled rangers, but also our team of volunteers. Through volunteer support led by skilled staff, we have been able to improve the ecological and biodiversity value of each site through effective habitat management. We continue to build on social engagement and encourage a deep sense of understanding, ownership and familiarity within the community. Future aspirations include replicating the social forestry concept across the North. A formal partnership has now been created between the Rockingham Forest Vision Group and 8 key organisations, including NNC, which through Heritage Lottery funding is building links between communities, woodlands, and is seeking enhancement opportunities for biodiversity, particularly in the northern part of the Rockingham Forest area. So during the winter months, we also offer coppicing sessions to local businesses, to council departments and to community groups. So this is a big tick on both sides. It helps create team building sessions for those wanting them. And it also helps local businesses meet their sustainability targets, whilst also in turn helping us meet our operational targets on the ground. Next slide, please. So as you can imagine, we do face challenges along the way. And at the moment, the environment team is currently controlling the presence of ash dieback across all NNC estate. We're doing this through a balanced approach, following national guidance provided by the Tree Council, the Woodland Trust and the Forestry Commission. And hopefully you've recently seen the communication that we've put out there through the communication bulletin and the website. A more pressing challenge, though, for the Woodland project is gaining financial security. So as I've mentioned, the project has always been fully financed through external funding, which now finances the 4 full-time members of staff, 2 casual staff for the Woodland shop, and the operational budget, which includes the tree management for all of those 5 sites. And it's estimated that this funding will run out in 2026. So if we are to retain the future conservation of these sites, further financial support is required. Next slide, please. So in my opinion, the project is a national exemplar, and at the moment its future is precarious. We are committed to sourcing and then applying for external funding, and will continue to develop our business plans for income generation. But the council has a decision to make regarding whether it will support with future investment. Securing the financial sustainability of the project will enable us to retain knowledgeable and highly skilled staff and ensure the continuation of high quality conservation management, providing opportunities for the enhancement of biodiversity, meeting corporate targets, including the KPIs set in the carbon management plan, and will ensure that the thriving network of volunteers is supported. Okay, thank you for listening. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Rebecca. I'm just getting the screen back to where it was so I can see whose hands are up. Councillor O'Hara.
Rebecca, that's fabulous. I think the work you've done over the years has transformed a lot of the areas in Corby, because a lot of the woods, it's expensive to maintain trees, it's expensive to look after them. It's even more expensive if you have to fell them for the benefit of the planet, or lack of benefit if you have to fell them. I just want to say thank you, really. I think the work that you do, the education you're giving, young and old, is amazing. It stays with you forever. I think the training that you give is helping people with mental health problems and enhancing the habitats for the animals, etc. I love the fact that we're not planting whips, that we're planting sustained. We're doing sustained planting with more mature trees, which is good, and that we're looking after them. But I just think the areas now, I mean, what we've done at East Carlton Park is amazing. It made me smile when Jules chose it as one of their areas to do their winter catalogue about 2-3 years ago now, and that was funny watching them do it. But I just think it just shows you how much we are on the map, and that, I hope we do continue to fund, and we continue to help our communities, and more importantly, we continue to look after our woodlands for many, many, many years and generations to come. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Hara. Absolutely true. Councillor Pengelly.
Rebecca is doing an absolutely brilliant job in Corby, and I think you know that. And it was an initiative by Corby Borough Council that I'm happy that North Northamptonshire have carried on supporting. A couple of questions, and the first one is about the tree nursery, and Corby Town Council will be taking over the allotments soon, and there are at least one allotment with a lot of space there where you could probably put a tree nursery in. We could work together on that. So it'd be good for you to come and visit one of these allotment sites with us. So I'll try and arrange that if that's okay with you. In relation to our dieback, we're doing a great job at North Northamptonshire on tackling this, but there are cases in people's private gardens, and just wondering if yourself or Liam can advise on that, because it costs a lot of money to take a tree down, and the consequences of it is immense, as people are aware of. And the final point is, in our woodland, we've got copses, areas where we haven't got any trees, which is just as important as the areas with the trees. I remember about 15 years ago, it was being mooted that we should build the swimming pool on the open space next to the Bolton Lake myself and Jimmy Kane at the time fought against, and there was going to be a woodland built on the open space on the other side of the cube to the cube. The cube wasn't there at the time, about 30 years ago. Where are we in ensuring that there is never going to be any building work done on our woodland, and where we have open spaces, we won't be putting anything there apart from like what you've got, a portable building down at the Bolton Lake Cafe?
Thanks, Mark. Well, first of all, yes, would be happy to do a site visit at the allotment in question. Obviously, through the Growing Project, we're trying to reinstate some of the lost allotments as well across Corby, and looking at the school groups as well, reinstating some of the school allotment sites. So our project officer is working hard on establishing links across the community. So it would be really good to have a meeting to discuss what the town council are doing in that respect as well. So ash dieback, obviously our responsibility is to look after the NNC estates for all trees under our ownership. As you can appreciate, we often, Liam and I, get requests through from residents looking at trees within residential boundaries. So we'll continue to do that, and we've now got the information up on our website for residents to have a look for privately owned trees in terms of what they can do to mitigate any health and safety issues that they might be experiencing, and we'll continue to support in that respect. There's also a lot of links now to the Woodland Trust and the Tree Council that we can signpost people to if they've got further questions in that respect. And in terms of planning, obviously, I'm hopeful that the woodlands are protected. They're a conservation site, and planning developments wouldn't be approved, particularly on the sites in question that I've been talking about today. But obviously we'd have to get planning to advise further on the mitigations against any development on those areas.
Thank you, Rebecca. Councillor O'Hara.
Sorry, Chair, it was just well, actually responded a little bit to Mark's question, really. We did do a review a couple of years ago that was part of SSP2 to have historically and visually important areas protected and our open spaces, and the inspector that came to Corby protected a lot of your open spaces, which I think, Rebecca, included all our woodlands within the Corby area. The inspector was really good at making sure that they were protected, so I think you'll find that they are they come under either the woodland or the green open spaces, or they'll become under the visually important. You would have done a review of it, Mark, within Corby Council. And the other thing I forgot to ask, Rebecca, I don't know if you've noticed, but with the ash dieback in mind, I've come across it twice this week, and I haven't had a chance to survey it or Google it. That I've noticed with a lot of the weeping willows, because the land's been really warm, our trees aren't losing their leaves quite as quickly. So therefore they may not bud in time, ready for spring. and I didn't know whether that's something you may have noticed within your work, but I have noticed that a couple of weeping willows, they've lost all their leaves, whereas trees around haven't, and they almost look like they're dying. So I don't know whether we have got a problem with weeping willows, but I've noticed 2 this week in gardens that I've been in, or in woodlands that I've been in. So I didn't know whether you were aware of that, if there is a problem with them this year because of the lower rainfall that we've had and the warmer weather we've had. So don't know whether that's a concern or not. Thank you.
It's not really been on my radar through our works. Perhaps Liam's tree gang might have noticed something within the work that they're doing. Liam, can you advise on that one?
No, there's been no reported instances. But if you email with the locations and they're on NNC land, I'm happy to get them surveyed. Actually, shed at different times.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's just that I was quite, it just kind of shocked me really. I thought, that's a bit odd, because if the trees don't lose their leaves quick enough, they don't bud. They need to bud before the winter, because obviously they won't then burst into life for the spring, will they? So that's what I was looking at. I thought that's a bit odd that they've lost everything, yet the trees around haven't. Normally by the end of October, they're pretty bare. The ever-changing colours are just amazing, but I just noticed it just kind of hit me, because this specific weeping willow, which I don't think is on our land, in fact I'm sure it's not, had lost everything, and it's such a vast size, so it kind of hits you because it's a walkway into the park, but I think it's on the residents' land rather than our land. I'll have a look anyway, but thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay, so no other hands up there. Again, thank you, Rebecca, for that presentation and for all the work that your teams are doing. I know you've got a really committed team with the officers and the volunteers who are always out and about doing things to improve the woodland and keep it as nice as it is across the area. So move now on to the last agenda item, which is an update on the household waste recycling centre options. I know there have been a number of workshops that members from this EAP have participated in relation to that. So I'm not entirely sure who I'm handing over to, but I'll hand over to possibly Steve.
It's going to be Leslie.
Good morning. I've got a presentation. I'm going to try and see if I can share it. Again, I don't usually use Zoom, so I'm trying to work out how to do this. 1 second.
That's okay. Oh, no, mind.
Let's present. Come. Where's present? Okay. So now I can't see you, so I hope you can see this.
We can, Leslie.
Okay. So this is about the household waste recycling centres, for which we need a new service from April 2025. I'm here today. Lauren is also on call. She's our waste performance officer who manages the HWRC contract as it stands. So if we've got any questions towards the end, I'm hoping that Lauren will be able to chip in and help us there. So as Councillor Pentland has mentioned, we did do some workshops over the summer of this year with some of you regarding our HWRC's and our current contract, so that we could undertake an options appraisal. So I'm here to just give you a very brief outline of what the outcome of that presentation piece of work was. So just to recap, within the waste 3-year plan which spans 2022 to 2025, which was approved by executive last year, we were required to undertake an options appraisal of our North Northampton HWRCs because they are due to end contract in March 2025. The management of HWRCs over the next 15 years is estimated to be around £60 million. And these new contracts, if that's the way we were going, was going to be needed to be in place by April 1st, 2025. So we undertook this options appraisal with a company called SLR Consulting over the summer. We asked them to look at whether our current service was suitable for the growing population of North Northamptonshire, whether it would be fit for purpose until 2040, and if not, what they would recommend that we would do. We obviously asked them to look for options on financial savings. They also looked at our current provision, policies, performance, possible future service options, optimum locations, and whether or not we should bring the service in-house or continue to procure an outsourced service. Obviously, the options appraisal itself is 100 plus pages. We haven't been able to share that with you yet, but we hope to be able to do that within the next week or so. So I'm also not going to go into the full outcome of all those 100 pages, but ultimately, North County will be benchmarked against other authorities, national standards, looking at those current, facilities and policies, and our infrastructure. And ultimately what we are hoping is that the options appraisal itself will form a very good basis for a strategy that we can develop for our organisation. So the findings were that our current HWR service is adequate. I think that's the word that came out really. We're reasonably comparable to other councils, and our facilities are being within a good distance of households, meaning that about 98% of residents can get to a HWRC within 30 minutes. There is obviously some need for attention on some of our HWRCs, because we already have a high ratio of households per HWRC, which obviously coupled with potential growth would cause those centres to become potentially unsustainable, potentially suggesting that we need a further sites towards the 2040 period. So, like I say, at the moment, they're acceptable. Will they be fit for purpose until 2040? Not according to the options appraisal. We expect that there will be a 26% growth by 2040, which will put additional pressure on our existing sites. We're talking about 7,000 additional tonnes of waste, and when you consider our current sites currently manage between 5,000 and 9,000 tonnes per annum, that's the equivalent of a new site. Each of our existing HWRCs 2% opportunities for adaptation and expansion, which could help us meet those demands. However, changes at Corby and Wellingborough are thought to be should be prioritised in order to meet that future demand. That includes looking at expansion of those sites, moving those sites in order to future-proof their capabilities. The changes to all sites will require a relatively considerable investment, and obviously a new site or repurposing of sites will cost potentially £1.8 to £3 million per site. So obviously we've got some thinking to do on that one. Then in terms of financial savings, unfortunately it's indicated that whether we stay with an outsourced service or an in-house service, that unfortunately the costs are likely to be higher than our current baseline budget. However, it does show that an outsourced model is anticipated to cost about £140,000 less than an in-house option, which is primarily due to staff payroll costs. It's thought at the moment that an outsourced provision will probably be about 10% more expensive than our current one, whereas an in-house would be somewhere between 15 and 17%. So the further investigation of the in-house versus an outsourced contract. The main consideration for why it would be more expensive than an in-house is that it would require more staff within NCC's client team. Currently that is Lauren, and obviously if we were going to run it as an in-house service, we would need more than recommended potential 4 additional FTEs into our team. We'd also then have the 2B costs of bringing in potentially 25 members of staff that currently work on the HWRCs. We are aware that that requires a lot of work in terms of setting up the structures, and also with the high turnover of staffing within the staff on the HWRCs, there is a risk to the authority of having to be very reliant on agency staff. It did say obviously if we wanted to bring it in-house that we would need 18 to 24 months. if you already had a client team, which we don't currently have. And obviously within that timescale, we don't actually have time to get one in place by April 2025. The option appraisal did look at elements of service delivery, retention of staffing, and a full range of the governance and stuff. And at the moment, the recommendation is that we continue with the contracted out service in order to deliver HWRCs for North Northampton going onwards. So at the moment, we're recommending that we go with a new outsourced service, replicating very closely what we currently have, which is 4 HWRCs in Corby, Kettering, Rushden and Wellingborough, open 5 days a week, 10 till 6, offering the trade services, the e-permits. We're going to seek enhancement of reuse community engagement and add social value if we can to these contracts. And we are looking at a contract of up to 15 years. We have done some soft market testing, which is indicating that for contractors to be able to choose to invest in our sites, they need at least sort of 8 to 10 years. So at the moment, we're saying up to 15 years, but the denominations of that haven't really been explored too much further yet. And obviously, what we're seeking as part of this will be approval, which will allow us to develop that further. So what we're recommending is that we're developing a paper which will be going to executive in November the 16th. We are asking for to note that the HWRC options program has been completed, that we are asking for approval to go out to procurement to secure a HWRC contract, which will deliver the service for up to 15 years. Within that, we would need to secure a lease to provide a facility at Corby, because currently that is a leased site. But we're also going to ask for agreement to develop a longer term HWRC strategy, for which this options appraisal will be able to form a very good basis to set out future operational considerations and infrastructure for our sites, and then seek ways that we can find to fund those improvements. So our next step will be scrutiny after this meeting on the 31st of October, executive on the 16th of November. Following on from that, we'll implement those decisions and start the procurement process in order that we can start a new service in April 2025, and obviously develop a timeline in order to develop this HWRC strategy. Sorry, I don't know how to get out here.
Okay, thank you, Leslie, for that presentation. I'll just give you a second whilst you get your screen back to where it needs to be.
How do I get out?
We can see you, Leslie, so
okay.
To us, it looks like you're out.
All looks normal here. So thank you for that. Got a question from Councillor O'Hara.
Leslie, thank you for that. I know that you and your team have worked hard, and thank you, Steve, as well. I have a concern in terms of, I appreciate the business case that you know, if they're going to invest, then they need a 15 or 10 to 15 year term. What concerns me is that I know the Corby site is leased, and it's very small, very cramped. They can't cope with the traffic of a weekend. It's busy. So therefore it trails back, and they try to stop people being on that road. What concerns me is a few months ago we passed, didn't have a choice but to pass some large warehousing. Weldon seems to be getting a lot of warehousing around that area, so and the roads are going to be changed down there. So would that inform you to actually revisit where the Corby household waste recycling is, because it's being used more and more? People are moving more and more. We seem to be a more transient population, and that's because I think that a lot of people are renting and then having to move because people have worked from home and they need more space. A whole plethora of factors. But I think more than anyone, the Corby site is not fit for purpose. and hasn't been for some time. They've tried to change it, and they work really hard there to try and get people through. They take a fair bit of abuse, if I'm honest. And bless them, they're very good at dealing with it. You know, the staff should be congratulated for the way they do deal with it. And it's not their fault. It's just that it's capacity. It's more, it sounds ridiculous, it's more around the garden waste area and people trying to get rid of bulky items because the staff aren't supposed to help, but actually they need to sometimes because people turn up, they've had help to load the car, but don't have anybody with them to unload the car. So you'll find other people who are already there will go and help if the staff can't. So that was a concern. And the other thing is, as we're subcontracting, the sites will remain in our ownership. So there are assets. We're just subcontracting the actual service. And that's where the costs are negotiated down, if you like, because the costs are for staffing, for holidays, for sick leave and all that remain with the contractor, which is why we're subcontracting the service, but we retain ownership of the sites. I believe that's what we're doing. But I don't understand why we would do a 15-year contract or a 10 as opposed to say a 10-year one, because do we not, are the facilities within ours, are the skips, I presume, are the outsourced contractors, and the machinery they use to crush down the stuff in there, are they ours or are they the outsourced contractors? Is that what you mean by their investment? Sorry, a few questions there. Thank you.
I'm happy to come on back on those because I know Leslie's done a lot of talking already. So firstly, with regards to Corby, you're absolutely right. We recognise that Corby is a constrained site, and there's one of the options that we're looking to do as part of a longer term strategy on how we're fit for purpose in 2040 is to look very much look at where is the ideal solution for HWRCs. It's not going to be a quick fix because trying to get planning permission and the various environmental licenses required for these sort of things takes a while, but it's certainly something that I think, as Leslie showed within the presentation now, the feedback we've had from the analysis is that we need to adapt our entire HWRC service to make sure it's fit for purpose. So what we're proposing is we begin work on a strategy for HWRCs so that we get all the decisions and investments we need in place to meet the outcome that the council wants to achieve by 2040. So it's absolutely something we're looking at doing. You're right, we are currently leasing that site. So as part of the next year, we'll be reviewing three various options. Could we extend the lease? Could we extend the lease to expand that site to look at it in a different way? Because there is land surrounding the site that is owned by Suez. Looking at other land in that area that we could perhaps secure a better market rate, or looking, is there any of our own land that we own in that area that we could relocate to? All of them have got various pros and cons, and that's part of the work we'll need to be doing over the next year or two. But as part of the procurement, we need to give some certainty. So as part of the procurement, it's, well, this is our land and we can only improve going forward.
Steve, sorry, through Chair Harriet, sorry. It's just a concern really because of the development that's in that area, because I know what's been passed in terms of warehousing and that, and some of it's quite bespoke. There's top drawer going in there, which is a housing, almost like prefab houses they're going to be building. So I'm thinking really that the vehicles that are going to be coming past there are going to be absolutely massive. And you've got cars queuing. I just think it's a recipe for disaster. I know they're putting 106 monies in, they've got to change the junction and that there. I appreciate all that. But there are a plethora of warehousing already gone into that Weldon area. They're almost encircled by warehousing now. And I'm thinking really if the development you've got at Priors Hall, it's an exemplary development. And the amount of houses that have gone up there and the amount of housing that are going onto Hamwood Park in, Kettering, you've got 5,000 housing. And what's coming online in Wellingborough. I don't know if Wellingborough could even cope with it. But I think more than anywhere, Corby is just can't cope now. So would it be that you could do two sites? I'm just thinking that it came to the planning last week about the digester. It's already got planning permission, but that backs onto the Priors Hall development. So I don't know how that's going to work and whether that would be a suitable place to house a smaller recycling centre. And my last question is, I noticed that on the new contract, there was no upcycling. There's no, are we not doing that in the future then? There's not going to be anybody on site that can take away goods that might be able to be reused and upcycled. And you know, people, I'm thinking of people's finances. You know, people do go in there and buy washing machines and goodness knows what. You see all sorts going out of there. I think they go to an upcycling shop. Are we not doing that in the future? Because that doesn't appear in your bullet points for procurement in the future.
Sure. I say Leslie's got her hand up, so I'm sure she'll come back on the detail of Corby and the detail of that. But just to sort of finalise the response to your initial question regards to the timescales of contract, you're absolutely right. It's that plant and storage containers on site that the new provider would need to invest in order to write it off against the contract, and that's where an 8-year period is typical. The sort of the life scale of one of those sort of the crane type things they use on site. So the alternative would be a shorter contract, but it would be a lot more expensive year on year for us because they'd have to write off that investment over a shorter period. So Leslie, go and I'll let you feedback on the detail.
So in terms as well on the Corby site in of itself, we would potentially look to see if we could get a slightly shorter lease option, or at least breakpoints, so that if actually it turns out that that site does become untenable within the lifetime of the new contract, we could move it. We have moved HWRCs in the lifetime of this current contract, so it's not unheard of to sort of suddenly go, well not suddenly because you wouldn't do it quickly, but to move sites within the term of the contract. I don't know that we would be able to do 2 sites, because then it would be even potentially the cost would then go up even further. But again, it depends on whether you'd have one open on one day, one on a different day. That, you know, can be considered and explored within a strategy. And in terms of the reuse, yes, we would be looking at that. I think I'll probably change the wording against the current reuse line and the line I put into that presentation. Apologies if that's confusing. We would be seeking reuse and upcycling probably in a more visible way than it's currently. Like you say, currently it's with off-takers who take it off and sell it in shops and on online auctions. However, what we would hope for is probably a slightly more visible reuse facility. Talking in the self-market testing, a lot of them do a lot more visual upfront on-site stuff. We'd struggle potentially still with Corby and Wellingborough because they are so small to actually have that on-site, but it's exploring within. Going out to procurement will allow us to explore with operators what options are available to us, what they can propose to us that we might not have thought of ourselves. So we've had this contract for 15 years and you kind of get sort of, this is how it is, so this is how it will be. So hopefully by going out to procurement, we can find out what is the best solution for us.
Okay, thank you both.
Thank you. Councillor Pengelly.
Yeah, in relation to Corby, I'm amazed that, again, we're being told, and I think the words 2040 were used in the gentleman's comments, that we've known about Corby and the issues at Corby for many years, and Councillor Hara is correct. The buildings are almost up on, 3 of the buildings are almost up on that site, up on the New Weldon Industrial Estate already, and the amount of vehicles going up and down there, and if you're driving there in a car, it's a scary place to go to. The council were looking at the idea of cutting the road off halfway down as well, which would make it even worse. So there'd only be one way in, one way out, and it's dangerous there. It's plainly it's dangerous there some days, and we've known about this for 10 years, and why have we not got a site now? It's the same, well, I take it the same officers that work for the county council are looking at this, and I'm just amazed that now we're being told we're going to look at it again. We should have identified the site for this 4 or 5 years ago. The county council should have done it. So that's one point. The second point is, reading the report, there doesn't seem to be enough work looking at bringing in-house. There are in-house providers of these all over the country. How many of them did we speak to find out the cost that they save by doing it in-house rather than doing it to a private company? It seems that we looked, let's go private, and that's what we've done, which I'm really disappointed in.
Leslie, do you want to come back on the analysis and the other authorities that we spoke to?
Yeah, so the in-house was explored through the consultants SLR. When we circulate the full options we praised, we will be able to see more detail. I couldn't really capture all of that detail in a short presentation, and it will show sort of the questions that were asked of them. Off the top of my head, I can't remember all of them. I think we went to 3 or 4 authorities that were similar size and nature to ourselves, found out what their costs were. Obviously not everyone was able to provide us with their full cost breakdown, so some of it was taken from benchmark data that's widely available, because obviously some of it can be commercially sensitive. I do appreciate your comment about it being potentially disappointing that it's not coming in-house, but equally we have a team of Lauren and half a couple of other members of staff in at the moment that isn't sufficient to do that. What we have sort of would put into the HWR strategy, actually, if that is the direction that the council wants to investigate, then it can actually be done within the HWR strategy for the future. But for 2025, it is just not an option.
And just to sort of add on to that, it's where the costs for sort of bringing it in-house are more around the sort of the back office functions. So having sort of dedicated staff that are looking to commoditize the recycler. An outsourced provider has got one person covering 4 or 5 contracts, but undertaking all of that, where we'd have to be having all these specialists in to undertake certain activities, and commoditization of this recycler is a very specialist activity. So it's not one of those that could potentially be brought in-house to do. There's also sort of a lot of the legislative and environmental requirements that are required for anything to do with waste on that disposal side. So you'd need those specialist resources in well. So that's where the sort of the savings from outsourcing are, is because they spread a lot of this back office function across several contracts where we would need that dedicated resource just in-house.
Okay, thank you, Steve and Leslie, for going through those questions. I haven't got any other hands up. As you outlined, next steps are that there'll be a going to scrutiny and also to executives, so it's going to get a lot of discussion further to this, certainly. So thank you again both for coming along to present that to us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, brings us to the end of the agenda for today. We've got through quite a lot, so that's really useful to have your input into all of that and inform the papers that go to executive as well. The next meeting is going to be on the 29th of November. That is the December meeting moved slightly a couple of days forward, just to make sure we can fit everything in. So thank you again and have a good day.
Thank you.